You must have heard of it. Dieselgate, the biggest scandal in automobile history. The list of suspects keeps on growing. At the heart of it all, diesel engines. 4 years ago, well before the Volkswagen affair, Cash investigated one of Europe's favourite fuels. We dived under the bonnets of our cars and inhaled from exhaust pipes.
Moi, je me mets là, je fais ça, et vous me dites que ça, ce qui sort d'ici, c'est plus pur que l'air que je respire. Vous voulez que je fasse l'expérience, que je reste 10 minutes comme ça?
At the time, the manufacturers sold us a super clean diesel.
Est-ce que le diesel a encore un avenir?
Oui, je pense, oui. Nous allons rendre nos diesels de plus en plus propres, avec de moins en moins d'émissions. C'est tout à fait normal.
After the Volkswagen scandal, we went back to our old files and got our hands dirty. What we discovered is enough to make you choke.
Vous voyez, moi, j'ai pas du tout l'air malade, je le suis. La pollution me rend malade, me tue à petit feu.
We went to the United States, the origins of the earthquake that is shaking the automobile world.
There was a clear fraud of immense proportion because of their greed to sell more cars.
At the heart of the storm, there is Volkswagen, but also the French manufacturers PSA and Renault. You will discover why they're now facing legal challenges.
Les voitures diesel sur lesquelles vous travaillez, vous saviez qu'elles ne respectaient pas les normes sur route?
On s'en doutait bien. Moi, je travaillais pas pour le diesel propre.
Une question sur vos voitures diesel. Oui. On a testé une Renault 4 d'avril 2017 et elle émet 9 fois plus de NOx que la norme européenne. Comment vous expliquez ces écarts?
Dieselgate is above all a matter of public health.
Allez, vas-y, allez, vas-y, c'est super.
A team of researchers evaluated the health impact, manufacturer by manufacturer. We will reveal their results. They are worrying.
D'après nos calculs, le nombre de morts prématurées par an pour 2015 s'élèverait à 550 pour la France seule.
Take a deep breath. Cash Investigation will reveal how the manufacturers have been hiding behind a smokescreen for years. The biggest scandal in the history of the automobile was born where nobody expected it. 6,000 kilometers from the Volkswagen headquarters in the USA, a country where less than 2 out of 100 cars run on diesel. To meet those who started the scandal, we set off to Morgantown, a small isolated student town in the northeast of the country. It's here in this workshop that everything started. Dan, Mark and Arvind are 3 mechanical engineers from the University of West Virginia. Dan is the boss. He runs the workshop. Arvind, the tough guy of the group. And Mark, the little novice. At the time, he was doing his thesis. All 3 have a shared passion: cars. So there was not really anything that predestined them to bring down Volkswagen. Once upon a time in Morgantown, there were 3 men who changed the face of the car industry. The Tinkerer. The Boss. The Student. The Volkswagen. The Scandal. The irony of this story is that the 3 cowboys had not expected to reveal the lies of the world's leading manufacturer.
We're all kind of car guys, so we never tried to pick a fight with Volkswagen.
It was just an academic exercise for us. There was nothing special about it.
We were trying to show that, yes, the diesels were clean here, and they're doing a good job, and trying to be proponents of that. It was kind of quite the opposite of what happened.
Dan, Mark and Arvind decided to test two of the cleanest Volkswagen vehicles on the market. And especially the star model, the Jetta. In 2009, it was voted the greenest car of the year in the United States.
2009 Green Car of the Year!
Wow. The trio will measure the emissions of the Volkswagen cars. They do these tests on roll benches, like the testing authorities. Oh yes, at the time in the United States, just like in Europe, this is how new models were tested before being put into circulation. The tests are done in a laboratory. Their research is centered on gases, nitrogen oxides, also called NOx. NOx is a real poison. At high doses, they can cause respiratory diseases and strokes. The tests confirm the assumptions of the three engineers. The Volkswagens were apparently not emitting nitrogen oxides.
I saw the emissions were like really low, and I remember texting or calling Arvind and telling him there's no emissions at all coming from these vehicles.
He would be texting me. He's like, oh man, you know, our hypothesis is correct. These vehicles are extremely clean. I don't even see any NOx, you know, it's just zero all the time.
So far, so good. But they have the idea to measure emissions of NOx on the road as they would be in real life, which the testing authorities do not do during their approval tests. And the three friends were not let down by the trip. In real conditions, NOx is off the chart compared to official standards.
We were up to like 25, 35 times high on the Passat and up to 40 times on the Jetta.
We were seeing tailpipe emissions that were higher than Class 8 tractors, you know, loaded to 70,000 pounds. So it was something that you couldn't believe.
Had Volkswagen cheated? This was a hard pill to swallow for these three car fans.
Initially, there was a doubt on whether we are doing something wrong.
We repeated the same cycle multiple times.
We realized that the numbers were correct.
They all stayed always the same. On all the conditions, highway or city driving, they were always at the elevated level.
We just joke, oh, maybe it's a defeat device, you know, maybe we should look into this more kind of thing. But it was just a joke. The joke has turned out to be real.
A defeat device. Without realizing it, they had hit the nail on the head. It is discovered by the American Environmental Authority, the EPA, who pursue the work of the three engineers in secret. During the certification test in the laboratory, this software activates the pollution control systems, but as soon as the car's on the road, like magic, it cuts the anti-pollution filters. On September the 18th, 2015, the EPA made its discovery public.
Had really forgotten about it. When I received the first call that day, it was a reporter. I went to the computer, Googled something, right? I was thinking, what is that? Was there an accident? Did something bad happen? What's going on? And, you know, saw that there was a notice of violation with Volkswagen.
I was shocked. All of a sudden, you become very important. You know, people ask you questions like, you know, on your expert opinion, what do you think? So I'm like, okay, I've suddenly become an expert.
The three engineers are caught up in a media storm. Dan, the head cowboy, will even become a Hollywood star, visiting the red carpet with his wife. He was elected by the prestigious Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential personalities of the year, alongside hip-hop queen Nicki Minaj and future president Trump himself.
What is it to be in the 100 most influential people of the time?
That was very much a surprise.
Next to the Pope.
Next to the Pope. It was overwhelming.
It must be said that Dan and his helpers really did make a hell of a mess. For having installed a defeat device in nearly 600,000 cars in the United States, Volkswagen has to pay a record fine, $20 billion. And the bill could be much higher for the German giant because Volkswagen has not just cheated Uncle Sam, but also the entire world. In total, 11.5 million cars with defeat devices have been sold around the globe. In a domino effect, Dieselgate reveals one by one how global manufacturers have cheated the system. After the German Volkswagen, it's the turn of French brands to be hit, starting with PSA, Peugeot-Citroen. In 2013, 2 years before the scandal broke out, the manufacturer welcomed us with open arms to its test centre in Poissy, in the Paris region, to explain to Elise that Peugeot diesel is clean.
Est-ce que pour vous, c'est assumé, j'allais dire, de dire que PSA promeut le diesel depuis des années et même des décennies? Est-ce que ça, c'est quelque chose que vous assumez?
On a une tendance extrêmement fâcheuse en France depuis quelques années, et c'est français, typiquement français, à stigmatiser le diesel.
Oui.
C'est quand même étonnant en France qu'on n'arrive pas à saluer les prouesses de l'industrie française, de ses chercheurs, de ses ingénieurs.
Pour vous, il n'y a pas de danger sanitaire du diesel?
Et aujourd'hui, avec le diesel tel qu'on le fabrique aujourd'hui, il est propre.
4 years later, the manufacturer is in the hot seat, suspected of having deceived consumers. PSA's troubles began in the autumn of 2015, a few days after the announcement of the Volkswagen case. Ségolène Royal, the then Minister of the Environment, launched a transparency operation on diesel cars. For this, she creates an independent inquiry commission composed of representatives of the administration, NGOs and parliamentarians. These experts will test more than 70 cars, both French and foreign brands, and test how much NOx these vehicles emit on the road. A first in France. Charlotte Lepitre is one of the leaders of the NGO France Nature Environnement. For a year, she participated in the Commission's investigation. She followed the results in real time. To distinguish the good from the bad, she's established a ranking of vehicles. At the top of the table, the most polluting.
C'est assez incroyable de se dire qu'avant ces travaux-là, ces résultats n'étaient pas disponibles au public. Les pollutions de nos véhicules étaient calculées en laboratoire dans des conditions qui ne correspondent pas du tout aux conditions réelles.
It seems crazy, but the manufacturers simply threw themselves into loopholes in the legislation. It's time for some legal talk. European regulations require manufacturers to comply with pollution standards under normal conditions of use, throughout the normal life of the vehicles. But until September 2017, the same regulations only required the authorities to test vehicles in the laboratory, in conditions which are anything but normal. Not like driving on a real road. Which is to say that the tests did not inspire much fear. Let's go back to Charlotte Lepitre and her ranking of the best and the worst diesel emitters. In the dishing out of prizes, PSA gets a special mention.
Sur 16 voitures Peugeot-Citroen qui ont été testées, il y en a combien qui respectent les normes d'oxyde d'azote sur route?
Finalement, il n'y en a une seule sur 16 véhicules Peugeot-Citroen qui va respecter la norme une fois sur route. Et ensuite, ça va à des écarts qui sont assez conséquents parce que, par exemple, la Citroën C4 Picasso, elle est à plus de 5 fois, presque 6 fois plus de pollution lorsqu'elle est sur route par rapport à la norme.
At PSA, a car blithely crosses the yellow line, and we're not talking about an old banger, but about a vehicle that is less than 3 years old. The Peugeot 5008. On the road, its emissions are off the charts. They exceed 7 times the emission standards for nitrogen oxides.
Nouveau SUV Peugeot 5008 avec 7 places. Entrée dans une nouvelle dimension.
These results came as a real shock. The justice system takes the case in hand. A judicial inquiry is opened on April the 7th, 2017. PSA is suspected of aggravated deceit on its pollutant emissions, which, as a consequence, rendered the goods dangerous to human health. According to investigators, nearly 2 million vehicles are involved. The group faces a potential fine of 5 billion euros. We asked the PSA executives again for an interview, but this time they refused. PSA, Peugeot, is not the only French manufacturer affected. Renault also finds itself in the firing line. Of the 12 models tested on the road by the Inquiry Commission, none fall within the legal limits.
Renault est très mauvais élève. Il n'y a aucun modèle diesel ici qui respecte les normes. Ils sont tous dans le rouge. Ils ont tous dépassé la réglementation une fois qu'ils sont mis en conditions réelles de circulation. Donc Renault, dans le top 5, est là 3 fois.
Renault's bestseller, the Espace, has emissions 9.2 times higher than the legal standard. The Captur, over 11 times.
Il existe une sensation comme aucune autre.
And at the very top of the table, the Talisman, 11.6 times higher than the emission standards.
Renault Talisman, maîtrisez votre trajectoire.
That's not all. The fraud control investigators suspect the French leading car manufacturer implemented, in a conscious and voluntary way, its fraudulent strategies. They criticise Renault for having programmed its pollution control systems so that they are super efficient in the lab and much less so on the road. Nearly 900,000 vehicles are affected. An engineer from Renault agrees to reveal the manufacturer's secrets to us. For several years, he worked in the engine's anti-pollution department. To protect his identity, we have reconstructed the interview.
Les voitures diesel sur lesquelles vous travaillez, elles ont toutes passé les tests d'homologation, mais vous saviez qu'elles ne respectaient pas les normes sur route?
Ah, on s'en doutait bien, puisqu'on mettait le paquet sur le cycle pour réussir tout juste à passer les normes. Le seul objectif, c'est l'homologation. Le but, c'est de passer les normes sur le cycle d'homologation. En dehors du cycle, on ne regardait pas. Moi, je ne travaillais pas pour le diesel propre. Je travaillais pour un système qui était capable de dépolluer dans des conditions...
Très particulières.
Voilà, c'était pas notre préoccupation de dépolluer ce qui se passait en dehors.
Même si vous travaillez dans la dépollution?
Chez nous, dépollution égalait homologation, c'était vraiment ça.
Et pas forcément ce que les gens respirent dans la rue.
Voilà, moi qui étais dedans, on n'avait vraiment pas le sentiment de tricher. J'ai envie de dire qu'on faisait aussi mal que les autres, en fait. On n'était pas parfait, on le savait pertinemment, mais on ne nous demandait pas de faire plus.
But yes, you heard correctly. In Renault's anti-pollution department, they are not working for clean diesel. All that mattered was passing the approval tests successfully. And on the road, who cares? The levels of NOx don't concern them. But seriously, at this point you're probably wondering why Renault is so virtuous in the laboratory but not on the road. The problem is that you have to choose between lowering pollution and driving, and the manufacturer seems to have made a decision. Fasten your seatbelts. It's a bit technical, but the detour is worthwhile. The gases leaving the engine are full of nitrogen oxides. These NOx go through the first system of pollution reduction, the EGR valve. Then the gases hit a second filter which traps the NOx. It is supposed to collect and store nitrogen oxides. And when the NOx trap is full, it must be emptied. And so it regularly purges the gases, transforming NOx into molecules that are harmless to humans. But to perform this purge, the NOx trap needs fuel. So the busier the NOx trap, the more fuel the car consumes, and as a result is less powerful. And that's a problem for the manufacturer.
Ça aurait rendu la voiture sans doute pas agréable à conduire parce qu'on aurait eu un veau. Les systèmes de dépollution vont complètement à l'encontre de la performance du moteur. Le piège à NOx, il a besoin d'être purgé. Pour être purgé, on injecte de l'essence. Si je le purge moins, je n'injecte pas cette dose d'essence en plus, donc je consomme moins.
But if the NOx trap is not purged regularly, it is no longer effective. The toxic NOx escapes directly in the air we breathe. Engineers from Renault would have chosen voluntarily to limit the frequency of purges and thus the effectiveness of the NOx trap. This is the opinion of the Fraud Control Department. This is what they write in their investigation report. Renault has implemented many technical rules, which make it possible to maximise the use of the NOx trap during the approval tests and to drastically limit the use when the customer is driving. What is hardest to believe in this story is the fact that Renault's NOx trap will not work well where it's needed most, in the city, where pollution is the highest. The fraud control investigators made yet another discovery. Renault had programmed its cars so that if the speed is changed by more or less than 2 kilometers an hour, when a purge is launched, the latter is stopped. The sentence is a little complicated, but it will all become clear.
Nos purges, elles fonctionnent quand le moteur est relativement stable.
Donc quand on n'accélère pas trop ou qu'on ne décélère pas trop.
Exactement. Sinon, la purge est interrompue avant la fin. Du coup, la stratégie, c'est dès que le gars bouge la pédale, on n'est plus dans les bonnes conditions, du coup, la purge s'arrête avant la fin.
Mais en ville, par exemple, on va changer beaucoup de vitesse parce qu'il y a des embouteillages, des feux. Donc dans les embouteillages, le système de dépollution fonctionne peu.
Ouais, tout à fait.
If you accelerate or brake a little too hard, there are no more purges, and NOx is released into the atmosphere, free as a bird. To make the Renault NOx trap really work, it would take a dream world with huge plains and endless straight roads.
Renault Kadjar, vivez plus fort.
On January the 13th, 2017, a judicial investigation was opened against Renault for deceit. Faced with the charges, the group's CEO goes on television in person. Carlos Ghosn tries to extinguish the fire.
Est-ce qu'il y a triche? Ça, c'est le point le plus important. Est-ce qu'un constructeur a triché? Réponse, non. Nous avons joué carte sur table. Nous avons reconnu qu'il y avait un certain nombre de moteurs en dehors des conditions d'homologation qui n'étaient pas aussi efficaces que d'autres. Nous avons amené les corrections et c'est ça qui est important.
Cross their heart. With these improvements, Renault will fall in line. In a statement, the brand is committed to reducing emissions of nitrogen oxides from its vehicles from July 2016. Are Renaults clean today? We want to check. But it is impossible to perform this test in France, so we go to Berlin. Meet Axel Friedrich, who is feared throughout the automobile industry. For more than 20 years, this chemist has tracked the pollutants of diesel engines for the German Environmental Agency. Today, he works for an NGO that investigates car manufacturers in great detail. To do this, he installs this sophisticated machine on vehicles which measures levels of NOx. And we're on our way, at the wheel of a brand new Renault Kadjar. Released in April 2017, 9 months after the promises of Carlos Ghosn. It's off to a bad start.
We're at 300, 400.
And we are going very fast.
No, 30 kilometers.
A good car has, at these conditions, 50, 60, not more.
We drive on all kinds of roads, like any driver.
No, we are again in an urban area, speed limit 50.
And we're at 600, 700.
Yes. It's a lot, it's a lot.
But it doesn't look like you're a Formula One pilot right now.
No, I go very smooth. If you see what I'm doing is less than most people in France are driving, because they drive much more aggressive than I do.
Without being a terrible driver, Axel Friedrich is getting readings that are off the scale.
We are 1,200 of NOx concentration.
It's a lot, so it's really very, very high. Unbelievable.
What does that mean for the emission control system? The NOx trap and
At least it doesn't work properly. It's perhaps a little bit working, but not very efficient. Clearly, this is an unacceptable high concentration. It's dangerous for the health.
There is clearly some mystery surrounding this car. After a 40 minutes drive, we return to the starting point. Axel Friedrich will calculate the average NOx released by the Kadjar during our ride and compare it to the European emission standard, the one that vehicles must meet during laboratory approval tests.
This car has emitted an average of 700 milligrams per kilometer NOx, which is 9 times above the limit. And this car is brand new. It's just 1 month old, so it's not an old car, it's completely new. And still, this Renault Kadjar emits so much. Renault is responsible to make this car clean. And Renault is obliged to improve this and to make an update of this and make it really to improve it completely. This is unbelievable.
Remember, that is exactly what Renault promised a few months ago, to improve their pollution control system in order to drastically reduce emissions of nitrogen oxides. We have a lot of questions to ask the leaders of Renault, but for months they've refused our requests for interviews, just like everyone else in the sector. A stroke of luck. The auto show is being held in Frankfurt. The huge event for car manufacturers. In the spotlight, electric cars with zero emissions. Among the manufacturers, it's a race to be the most green, as if diesel vehicles were already a thing of the past. Obviously, Renault are also playing the same tune.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome on the Renault booth. We are very proud to present to you Renault Symbiose.
The Symbiose, a new model that is 100% electric, presented in person by the group's second-in-command, Thierry Bolloré.
Symbiose demo car is clean, it's electric, and its battery can be fully charged in less than 1 hour.
Once the photo shoot is over, we took the opportunity to go and ask a few questions. Sorry, they'll be on diesel.
Bonjour Monsieur Bolloré, Jules Giraudat, France 2. Une question sur vos voitures diesel. On a testé une Renault Kadjar d'avril 2017, donc une voiture quasiment neuve. et elle émet sur route 9 fois plus de NOx que la norme européenne. Comment vous expliquez ces écarts?
Je pense que si ça vous intéresse que je vous donne des détails sur cette affaire-là, vous pouvez en avoir sans aucun problème. Mais
ça fait plusieurs mois qu'on vous demande une interview, monsieur Bolloré. C'est pour ça que je viens.
Déjà répondu.
Vous avez déclaré en juillet 2016 que vous alliez améliorer vos émissions d'oxyde d'azote sur vos voitures diesel. On a testé une voiture d'avril 2017. Elle émet toujours 9 fois plus que la norme. Comment vous expliquez? Pourquoi vous ne pouvez pas répondre sur les voitures diesel? Vous avez parlé beaucoup d'électrique aujourd'hui, mais on a l'impression qu'il y a un problème quand vous parlez de diesel.
It may be our questions that are the problem, but it's not easy to find someone at Renault who has an opinion on the subject.
Vous êtes directeur de la communication Europe de Renault?
Oui, tout à fait.
Bon, il faut qu'on se parle, je travaille pour une émission qui s'appelle Cache Investigation sur France 2.
Oui.
On vous a fait de nombreuses demandes d'interview.
J'en doute pas une minute.
Vous avez toujours refusé?
Non, c'est pas le temps, c'est juste maintenant, on est en retard déjà, ça passe comme par hasard. Non, je vous assure que c'est vrai. Mais je suis désolé, je peux
même pas vous poser de questions.
Mais je suis en retard là en fait, on est déjà...
Écoutez, c'est très simple. Est-ce que vous avez amélioré vos systèmes de dépollution après le Dieselgate?
Je vais vous amener avec quelqu'un qui pourra vous répondre. Cache Investigation.
Là, je suis occupée.
Ah mais personne ne peut me répondre alors. Bonjour monsieur.
Bonjour, moi c'est pareil.
Vous êtes vice-président de Renault? Beaucoup de ces véhicules sur route dépassent 5, 8, jusqu'à 11 fois les normes de NOx. Comment vous expliquez de tels écarts?
Honnêtement, je ne peux pas vous expliquer. Je suis pas la bonne personne pour parler de ça. Mais je peux vraiment pas.
Mais vous avez un avis en tant que vice-président de la stratégie de Renault?
Je n'ai pas d'avis sur le diesel ni sur les émissions.
Clearly, nobody wants to talk to us. So we'll have to read you the official press release. Renault says that none of its services have violated the rules, European or national, concerning the approval of vehicles. And states that its vehicles are not equipped with software to deceive pollution control devices. But diesel is not just about rigged software, mechanics and deceit. It is above all a public health issue that concerns us all. Air pollution kills. Today, it's the third highest cause of death in France. According to the National Public Health Agency, there are 48,000 premature deaths per year related to fine particle pollution. But one question remains. What is the human cost of Dieselgate? How many people died prematurely because of our over-polluting diesel cars? In Boston, on the US East Coast, a team of researchers from MIT, one of the most prestigious universities in the world, has decided to count the victims of Dieselgate. Their study has just been presented at a major US science journal. And they have agreed to give us a preview of their findings.
Vous allez bien? Très bien, vous? Ouais.
William Chaussière is the French person on the team. He conducted the survey that could shake the automobile industry. To calculate the human toll of the scandal, William Chaussière and colleagues looked into the statistics. Their goal? To assess the probability of developing a fatal disease for people who breathe excessive NOx.
Selon votre étude, quel est l'impact sanitaire du Dieselgate en France?
D'après nos calculs, en France, le nombre de morts prématurées par an, qu'on a calculé du coup pour 2015, s'élèverait à 550 pour la France seule, sur un total de 4000 à l'échelle de l'Europe. C'est 550 morts prématurées, donc gens qui auraient dû vivre plus longtemps et dont la vie a été abrégée par les excès de NOx.
How many of these deaths are related to French cars that exceed emission standards on the road? The MIT researchers were able to establish an estimate manufacturer by manufacturer. According to their study, just Peugeot and Citroen cars would have caused 50 premature deaths in France in 2015 and 140 in Europe. For Renault vehicles, the researchers' calculations are even more alarming.
On a estimé que Renault en France causait à peu près 140 morts prématurées en 2015. Et si on étend à l'Europe, on a estimé que l'impact sanitaire de Renault en Europe s'élevait à 670 morts prématurées. Et ce sont donc des gens qui vont mourir plus tôt que leur espérance de vie à cause des excès de NOx par les voitures Renault.
Mais on le sait, une voiture Renault ne roule pas que 1 an, elle va rester en moyenne 12 ans sur les routes.
Voilà, et donc les voitures Renault qui émettent trop de NOx en 2015, elles en émettront aussi trop en 2016 et en 2017. Et donc le problème tel qu'il est quantifié en 2015, naturellement, se prolonge sur les années suivantes. À moins que vraiment activement on retire toutes les voitures de la flotte, ce qui paraît assez improbable.
If we believe the calculations of the MIT researchers, if nothing is done in the near future, the toll could reach thousands of premature deaths. After years of silence, the victims of air pollution are starting to mobilise. "30 individuals who've been affected decided to take unprecedented action. They are taking the state to court for not having done enough to protect them from these harmful emissions. We met with 4 of them: Rachid, Clotilde, Renault and Sandrine. Some suffer from acute respiratory problems, others are speaking for their sick children. Their goal, to make the state face its responsibilities. They particularly criticise its lax attitude to car manufacturers.
Pourquoi aujourd'hui vous entamez cette procédure?
Pour interpeller? Pour interpeller, parce qu'il n'y a que comme ça qu'on pourra faire bouger les choses. On se sent méprisé en tant que victime, en fait, parce qu'on parle des méfaits du tabac, de l'alcool, des accidents sur la route, mais des victimes de la pollution. Les gens qui sont à l'hôpital, qui se font des crises d'asthme, les gens qui meurent, ça, on ne les voit pas, en fait. Vous voyez, on ne voit pas les victimes. Je n'ai pas du tout l'air malade, mais je le suis. La pollution me rend malade, me tue à petit feu. Et voilà ce que ça fait sur moi. Parce qu'effectivement, ni vous, on ne voit pas. Même sur vos enfants, on ne voit pas. Mais c'est pas parce qu'on ne voit pas qu'on n'est pas atteint.
Le problème, c'est que j'ai 2 enfants de 4 et 8 ans et qui sont malades depuis plusieurs années. Ça s'aggrave et toute la nuit, on se réveille parce que vous avez l'impression qu'ils vont s'étouffer. Et puis voilà. Et j'étais pas conscient, comme tout le monde, moi le premier, j'étais pas conscient de la pollution, absolument pas. Je m'en contrefichais d'ailleurs, même pour vous dire. C'est quand vous le vivez que vous comprenez à quel point on est empoisonné tous les jours.
For Clotilde, Renault, Rachid and Sandrine, one thing is certain. Their diseases are closely linked to pollution from diesel engines.
Pendant des dizaines et des dizaines d'années, l'État a poussé en vous disant que le diesel était sain, que c'était une technologie française. On l'a mis en avant et on se rend compte qu'aujourd'hui, avec les scandales Volkswagen, Renault, Peugeot, etc., on se rend compte que non, bah finalement, c'est...
On a été dupés,
voilà.
On nous a menti.
Donc la responsabilité de l'État est engagée.
Il faut quoi? Il faut 200, 300 000 morts par an de la pollution pour que ça bouge plus vite. On est très faible aussi dans les mesures d'urgence à prendre. C'est aussi parce qu'on n'a pas poussé les constructeurs à faire d'efforts. Au contraire, on a fermé les yeux, on a fait semblant de ne pas voir que les émissions n'étaient pas... Mais enfin, ouais. Et juste maintenant, on est au pied du mur, on ne peut plus attendre. Je ne vois pas au nom de quoi on devrait supporter ça et interdire à nos enfants de courir et interdire à nos personnes âgées de sortir et tout ça pour que chacun puisse prendre sa voiture et que les camions puissent tranquillement traverser les villes. Bah non.
The legal proceedings against the state have just started. They will certainly go on for years. After the Volkswagen scandal, the authorities finally seemed determined to act, as if they'd just become aware of the problem. However, the authorities have known for a long time that diesel vehicles are in trouble. Yes, you heard right. Road tests were carried out 3 years before Dieselgate and 3 years before the French investigation.
Solutions which
will allow us to move down, but also to the left.
From 2010 to 2014, this Slovenian was European Commissioner for the Environment, responsible for monitoring air pollution.
When exactly you learned that diesel cars were exceeding NOx European standards on the road?
I basically learned it soon after the beginning of my mandate.
In 2010?
At least at the end of 2010. I have first addressed that issue publicly 22nd March 2011 in European Parliament. I remember the date very well because it's my birthday.
The European governments, were they aware of it?
I think they were aware of it. We talked about that publicly, and if somebody was not aware of it, then simply that's not an excuse, to put it bluntly. But it's difficult for me to explain how nobody reacted after my first speech, how nobody really reacted when it was so blunt and clear to everybody. Why we were not so attentive to that issue in 2011, 2012, 2013, like we are today. We are today attentive to that issue not because of air quality, but because of the diesel scandal. It would never be so high on the agenda as it is today if it would not the scandal emerge. That's unfortunate that we react in that way, isn't it?
Ségolène Royal was Minister for the Environment twice under the Fifth Republic.
Oui, ça va bien. Désolée, hein, mais là, on est en pleine canicule.
In particular, from 2014 to 2017, during the diesel scandal, she was the person who launched the independent inquiry.
Interview Ségolène Royal première. Si vous le voulez bien, on revient à votre commission d'enquête. Et on revient notamment aux résultats de cette commission d'enquête. Oui. Les résultats sont très inquiétants. Sur 76 modèles de voitures diesel qui roulent en France et qui ont été testés dans des conditions réelles de circulation, 73 ne respectent pas les normes européennes d'émissions d'oxyde d'azote, les fameux NOx. Ça représente plus de 5 millions de véhicules qui roulent en France. Franchement, est-ce que vous vous attendiez à ces résultats?
Absolument pas.
Pas du tout. Non. Vous êtes tombé de l'armoire, comme on dit.
Je découvre le problème. J'arrive, je suis ministre. Je suis hallucinée. Vous savez, pour agir, encore faut-il savoir connaître les choses. Comment voulez-vous? Vous imaginiez, vous, que les gens trichaient, fraudaient?
Vous êtes sûr? Vous n'étiez pas au courant avant? Depuis au moins 2012, la Commission européenne savait que la majorité des véhicules en Europe dépassaient les normes d'oxyde d'azote sur route, et notamment des véhicules Renault et PSA. Et à l'époque, le ministère de l'Environnement en France a été informé par la Commission européenne. Moi, hein. Non, ce sont vos prédécesseurs qui étaient en poste à ce moment-là. Mais ça veut dire qu'ils ont eu tout le dossier de la Commission européenne. On est en 2012, doute, oui. On est d'accord, ils l'ont eu.
Oui, c'est vrai.
Le ministère du Développement durable est prévenu par la Commission européenne qui demande des sanctions et rien ne se passe.
Oui. Vous avez raison, c'est pas normal.
Rien ne se passe.
Non. Quand j'arrive, quelque chose se passe. Pardon de dire ça, mais
oui, quand vous arrivez et quand le scandale Volkswagen arrive.
Mais oui.
Parce que, pardonnez-moi, vous êtes arrivé, mais pendant quelques mois encore, rien ne s'est passé.
Quelques mois, c'est mieux. Oui, d'accord, mais enfin, pendant quelques mois, moi, je réagis. Et grâce à moi, je change les normes. Grâce à moi, il y a des recours au pénal contre les constructeurs.
Mais pourquoi le
ministre... Ça, bon, ça, je ne l'ai pas eu quand je suis arrivée dans la masse des choses. Mais du coup, c'est vrai qu'à ce moment-là, ça aurait pu... les gens auraient dû réagir déjà.
Donc là, vous dites faute?
Oui, faute. Inertie, je dis plutôt. Inertie et lobby automobile.
Inertia, a French tradition, which could cost us dearly. Since 2008, France is being prosecuted by the European Commission for violation of air quality standards. Over 19 cities are breathing unsafe air. The state may have to pay a fine of several hundred million euros. On the other side of the Atlantic, in the United States, where the Dieselgate started, the authorities took only a few months to react to the scandal. Less addicted to diesel, they even made a historic decision to put the affected vehicles out of harm's way. Nate loves cars, a passion that's fairly widespread in North America. But he is a rare bird. He only swears by one brand, Volkswagen. He runs a garage in the suburbs of Baltimore. And going to work, Nate made a discovery that shocked him.
On my way to work, I drive on a major highway, and I see, all these car carriers with Volkswagen TDIs on them heading south. From being an enthusiast, from following the scandal, I just sort of wondered where all these cars were going and how many were really there. It was a Sunday and it was raining, and my girlfriend and I didn't have anything planned, nothing to do, so we just came down and drove around, and then we found them.
Following the trucks, Nate arrives in an industrial area next to Baltimore Harbor. On arrival, this fan of the German brand discovers a surreal landscape. An open-air Volkswagen cemetery.
What was your reaction when you first arrived here?
I was really surprised at how vast it was and how many vehicles were stored in all the different parking lots. It's sort of daunting. There were so many cars, and they all looked brand new and just lined up bumper to bumper to bumper to bumper all the way across these parking lots. And then when we were driving, you'd think, okay, yeah, we found all these cars, and then you'd find another parking lot and then another parking lot. And then...
almost never stopped.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like, yeah.
All of these cars had their pollution control rigged and are now Volkswagen's problem. Today, the group has nearly 500,000 vehicles stranded on car parks across the United States. American justice has hit them hard, forcing the German giant to offer its customers to buy back their cars and also to compensate them. In total, for each consumer, a check for between $5,000 and $40,000. Of course, at that price, most customers accepted.
And as a Volkswagen fan, what does it make you to see all these brand new cars parked?
It's a shame, it's a bit of a waste, I guess. I know that by the letter of the law, they cheated, and obviously the emissions and environment, it's a big deal, and that's not something that people should play with or break the law. But at the same time, there's all these vehicles that are perfectly usable, I guess. People paid money to have these cars, and a lot of them probably love them a lot. And they sold them back because the deals were too good to pass up. And so now they're just sitting and may end up crushed, or who knows. So it's just a waste, I guess.
As long as these cars do not meet the standards, the manufacturer cannot resell them. And every day that goes by, Volkswagen has to pay huge amounts for the car parking spaces. In total, the German group has paid $5 billion in fines to the government and $15 billion to its clients. An astronomical bill, mostly because, notably, of one man, Michael Hausfeld. This Washington lawyer is one of the most famous in the United States. His specialty? Fighting against multinationals. In the Volkswagen case, he's part of the legal team that represents some 500,000 cheated customers.
Were you surprised that at the end the total was $20 billion of fine?
Absolutely. Volkswagen, like any business, did a risk analysis before they engaged in this defeat and cover-up. Okay, how much did we make? And how much, if we get caught, would it cost us? Most of the fines in the U.S. that were predicted by Volkswagen's lawyers would be maybe tens of millions of dollars.
Okay.
So what happened was what they say orders of magnitude greater than Volkswagen ever anticipated.
Today, Michael Hausfeld is going into battle again, defending Volkswagen customers, but this time in Europe. In Europe, 8.5 million affected cars are still in circulation.
Yes. There is no reason, legitimately, for European citizens who were exposed to these excess levels, of NOx, or for European consumers to be treated any less, than the United States counterparts. These cars should not be on the road. There was a clear fraud of immense proportion, which again not only cheated massive numbers, of European consumers, but exposed many European citizens to shortened lives because of their greed to sell more cars. If they paid U.S. consumers $16 billion at 500,000 affected vehicles, 8.5 million is hundreds of times more. So you're looking at a number that would far exceed the ability of almost any company, to pay if they had to pay a comparable amount. And to date has done nothing about it other than to stall and lie to the European market.
Did they succeed for the moment?
Yes, they have succeeded. They have succeeded in placating the European consumer.
Of the 8.5 million affected European customers, only a handful have so far decided to complain. You think that diesel is over? That the manufacturers have surrendered? Think again. Behind the scenes, they are regrouping. This is the moral of Dieselgate. October the 28th, 2015 in Brussels, in the middle of the Volkswagen scandal, they pulled off quite a coup.
C'est une étrange décision. Tous les nouveaux véhicules diesel seront autorisés à polluer plus.
In a closed-door vote, the governments of European countries finally adopted the approval of road tests, but they mostly eased NOx emission limits. That's right. Until 2021, cars will be allowed to emit precisely 2.1 times more than today. You may be wondering where France stood on this matter. Guess what? Their representatives voted for the right to pollute more. Strange, isn't it? Given that at the same time, Ségolène Royal, the Environment Minister, is launching her crusade against diesel.
Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de cette décision de l'Union européenne?
Elle est mauvaise, cette décision.
Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé?
Il y a quand même un progrès global, mais moi j'étais contre l'affaiblissement de ce dispositif.
Pourtant, Madame Royal, cette décision, elle a été prise le 28 octobre 2015 par les 27 États membres, 27 dont la France. La France a voté en faveur de cette mesure. Moi, je ne comprends pas. Il y a un double discours, celui qu'on tient en français et puis celui qu'on porte dans les instances européennes. Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé?
C'est qu'il y a un arbitrage. Il y a un Premier ministre en France, ça ne vous a pas échappé. Les ministres ne font pas tout ce qu'ils veulent comme ils veulent, là où ils sont. Donc il y a un arbitrage qui a été fait contre mon avis, avec des instructions qui sont données à ce moment-là à nos représentants dans les instances européennes et qui se sont alignés sur ce texte qui n'était pas un bon texte.
D'accord, donc vous êtes en train de nous dire qu'il y avait un arbitrage ministériel, que vous avez mangé votre chapeau, comme on dit en politique.
Oui, mais là, juste cet arbitrage, oui, il m'a été imposé.
Et c'est le Premier ministre qui a obtenu gain de cause?
C'est le Premier ministre qui arbitre. Le Premier ministre Matignon et Élysée, d'ailleurs. Pareil.
D'accord. Donc François Hollande.
Oui, mais le lobby du diesel est en France très puissant.
Before we leave you, one last bit of information that may surprise you. The automobile industry is having its best years. With record sales and revenues. Volkswagen has become the world #1. And Renault saw its profits increase by 19% in 2016. In the automobile world, everything still seems to be for the best in the best of all possible worlds, as if the diesel scandal had never happened.